In this episode, there is chipping, chopping, plastering, panelling and painting. Jane's still sanding, and I have a light bulb moment. Days at the chateau usually come with trouble of one sort or another. Thankfully, it's often the furry four-legged kind, which we don't really mind. The kittens are expanding their horizons and have taken their first steps into the wide world outside. They're small steps, as they've only got little legs, and Arwen has begun to show great affection for Lord Percy. But in the words of Queen Victoria, we are not amused. This week I remembered to adjust the height of my table saw blade. The blade guard has been removed because the guide is so close to the blade that it was getting in the way, so don't worry, I'm not a complete maverick. I've been full steam ahead with the panelling this week and some good progress is being made, as you will see. Because I'm repurposing the leftover panelling and fitting it somewhere it wasn't originally built for, I'm having to be a little bit clever in trying to match it up, as each piece is a slightly different size from the others. Which means shaving off a bit here and a bit there to give an illusion of symmetry. And if I fail, doesn't matter, as there'll be a whopping great bath in the way. Well, so far so good. I know it's only Monday, but it's all going a little bit better than it did last week already. And what's great is I love being able to use up bits and bobs that were effectively rubbish. They're offcuts. And because I've had to lower the bit of panelling that goes along there to match into this, I ended up with a nice long strip of the right thickness panelling. And so I'll now be able to use these to prop this side up at exactly the right height. All the way along, rather like that. And some might be slightly higher or lower, but that's fine. And then when I get the skirting board. When I get the skirting board to go along there, that will come up and can be screwed or glued to these bits. So that's really nice. That's really coming along in a way that I'm very happy about. So that's a really great start to the week. And it's only lunchtime. Speaking of which, it's lunchtime.
Ooh, what are you making, Rory?
I'm making Greek flatbreads. Just, really simple yogurt and flour, and rolled out with a bit of olive oil and fried. Quick and easy, and extraordinarily delicious. I was really enjoying piecing together the panelling, but jobs have to be done in order. So here I am chipping off old plaster. I had hoped to leave much of the plaster and skim up to it, but on closer inspection it was almost all ready to come off with a little persuasion. Next up was mixing the muck. It's quite different to the British gypsum type plaster. You don't get nearly as long to work it, and there's no real time for a cup of tea between layers. I have a feeling I mixed the first layer a little wet. I found it more difficult to work with than the second layer. It's been a long while since I've done plastering of any kind, and I'm sure a pro would have a few words of advice as to my technique. The second coat had a much nicer consistency and was easier to work with. Once that was done, I had a few minutes before smoothing it down for a perfect finish. Sorry, did I say perfect? I had a few minutes before smoothing it down for a finish. Well, that's Monday over, and I've done boxing work, and I've worked out exactly how it's all going to go, which I'm really pleased about, and I've plastered a wall. It's this stuff, the French stuff, this Lutèce 2000 or Lutèce 2000. I guess that's how you pronounce it, I'm not sure. It's different from plaster in the UK, which I have worked with a little bit more. And so it was quite an interesting experience. It wasn't the easiest thing I've ever done. It's not the most perfect job, but Jane is going to be wallpapering this wall, so it doesn't matter too much that it's not absolutely perfect. And also I was warned that this stuff can sort of bubble in places, and in a few places it has a little bit. But I believe I'm assured that the bubbles aren't air, and so when it's all dried I can just sand the bubbles flat and then it should be absolutely fine, because once the wallpaper's on there that will cover up any little errors. But you know, for first go I'm quite pleased with myself, but I'm losing the light, so I'm going to stop. I've made an absolute mess of my new floor in here, so I've got this to clean up and the buckets and the tools to clean, so I'll go and do that.
Welcome to Jane's Find of the Day with Jane.
Hello and welcome to this week's Find of the Day at Chateau de Pican. Today I'm talking about this. The first question is, what is it? I've seen this sort of thing described as a centerpiece. I guess you could also use it as a tray to carry things around, but I think it's meant to be a decorative, bold statement on a table or maybe on a sideboard. It is rather large. It must be nearly 2 feet long, if you count the handles, maybe about 2 feet long, and more than a foot wide. It's too big to just put some fruit in it. And it is made of wicker, some natural material that's been bent into an oval shape, and it's got brass around the top and these brass handles. So it's nothing I've ever seen before or had seen before, and I didn't know whether it was in the valuable category or the not valuable category. What do you think?
Jane, come and have a look, quick. It's circling.
I'm confused.
I'm joined by another group. They're all getting confused. One silly sod said, I think you should turn left here, and look at the chaos. Nigel! It's always bloody Nigel. What noise they make.
Yeah.
I've taken this outside light down. It's the one we use outside the kitchen, because it was sort of intermittently flashing, and it could just be the bulb, but I thought it was full of detritus of, you know, dead insects or something. So I pulled it down and I discovered it was half full of a hornet's nest. And yeah, so this is the hornet's nest. It looks pretty unpleasant, but it's long dead, I believe. And what's left inside is just the detritus, all the dead hornets and wasps and God knows what. It's all quite manky and disgusting in there. And the bottom of it's starting to rust out, so I thought I'd probably just buy a new one. And the wires were looking in a bit of a bad way. They were just wrapped up with electrician's tape. They were sort of largely open to the elements at the back. So I've bought a modern one. I say modern, I bought a new one. Here it is, all laid out in its unput together glory. I'll just check the installation instructions. Good, I think we've got that. Time to build it.
Whilst not a big job or an important one, it can be a real morale boost to get a project done from start to finish quickly.
Okay. Haircut! This last bit of panelling, I've got to cut out a hole for the toilet waste because it's going down the side of the toilet in the secret bathroom. And I don't have all the tools. I've said this before, I don't have all the tools I need for all the jobs. And so I'm using a coping saw, which I've done to, well, actually it's a really dodgy hole. It's very uneven, but it's a hole. So I've got to do something very similar here. And I don't like this saw at all because I'm not very good with it. But I'll do my best and I can smooth it out with something, some sort of sandpaper, make it look a bit nicer. And then hopefully I can put this on and then that will be the panelling. All but finished. Not quite, but all but finished. Oh, I can't wait.
It turned out much better than I'd initially feared it would. Now that the panelling is attached, I still have to fit the new skirting board, which hasn't arrived yet, and also attach some beading to the top and side of the end panel. One minor issue with putting wood panelling behind the toilet is that it moves the toilet forward away from the wall. This means that the original fixing holes I'd made are no longer usable. Also, the cistern doesn't reach the wall now, so I'll have to create a wooden support out of panel offcuts to bridge the gap. Before I could let Jane in with a paintbrush, I just needed to fill my screw holes with wood filler. Once sanded and painted, they'll be completely invisible.
Of course, the panels were now covered in a lot of fine sawdust, and so I needed to wipe it all down before beginning the undercoat. The undercoat started out rather thin. I'm not sure we'd mixed it well enough. In the absence of a mechanical paint whisk, Rory gave it another whiz and it started going on properly. Once finished, I had to leave it to dry before moving on to the colour. Once the first coat was dry, I started the second coat. However, I've almost run out of paint, and so Rory asked me to paint the areas around the toilet with what paint I had left. This way he can fit the toilet while we wait for new paint to arrive.
The moment that perhaps none of you have been waiting for.
So this centrepiece, as we're calling it, I have managed to identify, and there are a number of pieces that are sold as being similar to the designs of an Italian artist called Gabriella Crespi. So they're often referred to as in the style of Gabriella Crespi, vintage items made typically in the 1970s. And this is quite a classic of that type of thing, with the, being made of wicker, with the brass top and brass handle. Gabriella Crespi designed a lot of different things: furniture, jewellery, design, sculpture, and her works are very collectible and were sold to some very famous people like Grace Kelly and Audrey Hepburn. So she was very much a mover and shaker in the 20th century in terms of Italian design. So this item, it doesn't have Gabriella Crespi's signature on. If it did, it would be worth a fortune. But it doesn't. But even so, being made in the style of Gabriella Crespi of that period, an item like this I've seen for sale for $1,000. So I'm in the dressing room for the suite, for the guest suite, and this floor has been absolutely never-ending in terms of trying to get the surface looking good. We took the carpet up, and there was tons and tons of glue underneath. There were bits of the sort of webbing material of the carpet that was stuck down really, really hard, as well as lots of glue smeared everywhere. I've used about 3 litres of solvent to get as much of the glue off as possible. We then hired an industrial sander, so we thought that might be good, and it was good. I mean, it's taken the floor back to a really nice natural finish, which is good. But there's still glue, so then I used Rory's belt sander, but I absolutely hated that. It spits out dust, it's incredibly noisy, and it tends to make a bit of a groove, under my hands anyway, so that was just unbearable. But the orbital sander I'm quite happy with, because with my earphones on, it's not so bad, and it seems to be much more able to give a good finish. I mean, it's slow, but at least you can't leave grooves in the wood. There's still loads of glue. I'm going to have to get another litre of the solvent for particularly the corners, the doorway, but I'm hoping another couple of days. I mean, this has literally taken days and days and days of work. I mean, I do think Rory could have laid a completely new floor in the time that we've spent trying to rehabilitate it. So it's a bit disheartening in that sense, but that's the decision we made, and I think it was, it's a nice thing to try and do. So we press on.
Next week we're on a deadline. Our friends from England are visiting and we need the secret bathroom functional. The problem is there's no toilet, no bath. I've already removed the basins and I've cut off the water supply. Join us for the race against time.